My dear brothers and sisters, we live in a world where fear can consume us. Fear of failure, fear of the unknown, fear of loss, fear of rejection. These emotions can paralyze us and keep us from fulfilling our purpose. But Allah did not create us to be prisoners of our fears, He created us to rise above them. Let me share with you 5 key principles from the Qur'an and Sunnah to help us conquer our fears. Inshallah, remember who controls everything. My dear brothers and sisters, fear grips us most when we forget who is in charge. We fear the unknown because we think we must navigate it alone. We fear loss because we believe what we have is truly ours. We fear failure because we think our success is in our own hands. But the moment we realize that everything, our past, our present, our future, is in the hands of Allah, fear begins to fade. Look at Prophet Musa, standing before the Red Sea, an army behind him and nowhere to go. Imagine the fear of his people. They saw only 2 options, death by the sword or drowning in the sea. But Musa, Amos, a man who once feared even speaking, stood firm, and he uttered words that should be engraved in our hearts. Indeed, my Lord is with me, and He will guide me. Qur'an 26:662. Notice, he did not say, I will find a way. He did not say, let's see what happens. He had full certainty that Allah was in control, that there was a way out even if he couldn't see it. And what happened? The sea split. Not because Musa had the strength to do it, not because he had an army or a plan, but because he trusted in the one who controls the heavens and the earth. How often do we find ourselves in our own Red Sea moments? The situation looks impossible. We feel trapped between problems with no way out. But my brothers and sisters, if you are with Allah, there is always a way. When your heart is overwhelmed by fear, ask yourself, do you trust in your circumstances, or do you trust in the one who created them? Look at Ibrahim as he was thrown into the fire. The fire was real, the pain should have been real. But Allah, the one who controls fire itself, said, O fire, be coolness and safety upon Ibrahim. Qur'an 21:69. The very thing that was meant to destroy him became a means of his salvation. Look at Hira, alone in the desert with a crying baby, no food, no water. She ran between the hills of Safa and Marwa not because she thought the hills had power, but because she trusted in the one who does. And what happened? From that barren land, Allah brought forth the well of Zamzam flowing until today. How many of us are running between our own Safa and Marwa, searching for solutions, feeling hopeless? But just as the water of Zamzam was already written for Hajjah, your sustenance, your relief, your breakthrough, it is already written for you. The delay is not denial. The struggle is not without purpose. Allah is testing your heart. Do you trust Him, even when you don't see the way? And this is the essence of conquering fear. It's not about eliminating uncertainty. It's about knowing that even in uncertainty, there is certainty in Allah. The same Lord who protected Musa, saved Ibrahim, and provided for Hajjah is the one who is watching over you. So when fear whispers that you are alone, that you will fail, that there is no way forward, remember who controls everything. Fear is a test, not a sentence. My dear brothers and sisters, one of the greatest tricks of Shaytan is to convince you that fear is a prison, that once you feel afraid, you are stuck, incapable, defeated. But in reality, fear is not meant to paralyze you. It is meant to purify you. It is not a life sentence, it is a test from Allah to elevate you. When the Prophet Muhammad received revelation for the first time, he was afraid. He trembled as he rushed home to Khadija, his heart pounding, unsure of what had just happened. Think about that. Our beloved Prophet, the most courageous man to walk this earth, felt fear. But did that fear define him? Did he stop? No, that very moment of fear became the beginning of his mission. Fear is a test, not a punishment. And the test is not whether you feel fear, it is whether you push through it for the sake of Allah. The difference between those who succeed and those who falter is not that one feels no fear and the other does. It is that one trusts Allah enough to move forward despite the fear, while the other lets it dictate their path. Look at Prophet Yunus. He felt fear of rejection, fear of failure. So he left his people without Allah's permission. And what happened? He found himself swallowed by darkness. Darkness of the ocean, darkness of the night, darkness of the whale. But in that moment of complete isolation, where fear could have consumed him, he called out, "There is no God but you, glory be to you. Indeed, I was of the wrongdoers." Qur'an 21:87. And Allah responded, Allah did not abandon him because he made a mistake out of fear, Rather, He rescued him the moment he turned back, because fear is a test, but the mercy of Allah is greater than any test. How many of us feel like we are in the belly of the whale, trapped in our anxieties, feeling distant from Allah because of our fears? Maybe you're afraid to take that step, afraid to make that change, afraid of what people will say, afraid of failing. But remember, fear did not disqualify Yunus from Allah's mercy. It did not disqualify the Prophet from his mission, and it will not disqualify you from your purpose. And sometimes fear is placed in your heart not to hold you back, but to push you toward reliance on Allah. Maryam felt fear when she was alone, facing an unimaginable trial. But in her moment of despair, Allah reassured her, "Do not grieve. Your Lord has provided beneath you a stream." Qur'an 19:24. Notice how Allah did not remove the difficulty immediately. He allowed her to feel the weight of it, to experience the test, to struggle, because through that struggle she would find her strength, through that fear she would find her faith. And that is the reality of fear. It is not a dead-end road. It is a bridge that leads to greater faith, greater courage, greater closeness to Allah. The question is not whether fear will come, it will. The question is, when fear knocks at your door, will you let it in or will you let faith answer? Shaytan feeds on fear. Starve him, my dear brothers and sisters. Shaytan is a master manipulator. He knows he cannot take away your faith, so he works on weakening it. And one of his greatest tools is fear. Fear of failure, fear of loss, fear of the future. Because he knows that a fearful heart is a heart that hesitates, a heart that doubts, a heart that becomes distracted from Allah. Shaitan whispers in your ear, filling your mind with what-ifs. What if you don't succeed? What if you lose everything? What if they don't accept you? What if you're not good enough? He makes you imagine every possible disaster, every possible way things could go wrong, until you feel paralyzed. But do you know what's worse? Most of the time, those fears never even come true. You spend days, weeks, months worrying about things that never happen. And even when they do, they are never as big as Shaitan made them seem. Allah tells us clearly, the devil threatens you with poverty and commands you to immorality, while Allah promises you forgiveness and bounty. Qur'an 2:26-8. Think about this. Shaitan threatens you, but Allah promises you. The word threaten itself shows you that he has no real power. His only weapon is fear, but when you put your trust in Allah, you begin to starve Shaitan of that power. Look at the moment when Ibrahim was about to sacrifice his son, Ismail. Yanamil imbaha Ismail o ah. Imagine the whispers of Shaitan in that moment. What are you doing? This makes no sense. You will lose your son. How can this be good for you? But Ibrahim ignored the whispers, and what happened? Allah provided a way out. Because Shaitan only shows you the fear, he never shows you the reward of trusting in Allah. And this is exactly what he does with us. He makes us fear giving charity by saying, you will become poor, but Allah promises, I will increase you. He makes us fear speaking the truth by saying people will turn against you, but Allah says, I will protect you. He makes us fear taking a leap of faith by saying you will regret it, but Allah says, put your trust in me and I will take care of you. This is why in the Battle of Badr, the believers stood outnumbered, facing an army 3 times their size. And what does Allah say? It was only Shaytan who made his allies fear, so do not fear them, but fear me, if you are believers. Qur'an 3:17-5. Shaytan will always try to make the enemy seem bigger. He will always try to make the problem seem impossible. But Allah is greater than anything he can make you fear. So how do you starve Shaitan? You do the exact opposite of what he wants. When he tells you to hold back, you give. When he tells you to be silent, you speak. When he tells you to hesitate, you act. When he tells you to doubt, you trust in Allah. And when he fills your heart with fear, you fill your heart with Dhikr. Because a heart filled with remembrance of Allah has no space for the whispers of Shaitan. Find strength in Dhikr and Dua. My dear brothers and sisters, when fear weighs heavy on the heart, when the whispers of Shaitan grow loud, when the trials of life feel overwhelming, where do we turn? Some turn to people, hoping for reassurance. Some turn to distractions, trying to numb the anxiety. Some let fear consume them until they can no longer move forward. But Allah has already given us the antidote. He tells us in the Qur'an, unquestionably by the remembrance of Allah hearts find rest. Qur'an 13:28. The solution is not in overthinking, it is not in trying to control what is beyond our control. It is in dhikr, in filling the heart with the remembrance of Allah, in calling upon Him through dua. Because when you remember Allah, you are reminded that He is greater than your fears, that He is closer to you than your own breath, that He has never abandoned you and never will. Look at Yunus when he was in the belly of the whale, alone, no escape, complete darkness. If there was ever a moment to feel helpless, this was it. But instead of letting fear consume him, what did he do? He turned to Dhikr. There is no God but you, glory be to you. Indeed, I was of the wrongdoers, Qur'an 21:87. And because of those words, Allah rescued him. The darkness did not break him, it brought him closer to Allah. And that is the power of Dhikr. It transforms your darkest moments into moments of connection with your Lord. Look at the Prophet Muhammad when he was in the cave with Abu Bakr, hiding from the Quraysh. They were footsteps away from being captured. And Abu Bakr in that moment was afraid, not for himself, but for the Prophet. But what did the Prophet say? Do not be afraid, indeed Allah is with us. Qur'an 9:40. Notice he did not say, they won't find us. He did not say, we have a plan. He simply reminded Abu Bakr of Allah, because when you truly know that Allah is with you, fear has no hold over you. And that is why the Prophet taught us du'as to strengthen the heart in times of fear and anxiety. One of the most beautiful du'as he taught us is, O Allah, I seek refuge in you from anxiety and grief, from weakness and laziness, from cowardice and miserliness, from being overwhelmed by debt and overpowered by men. Bukhari. Why these specific things? Because anxiety, grief, and weakness are the things that keep us stuck. And when we let fear take over, it leads to an action, it leads to regret, it leads to a heart that feels distant from Allah. But when you turn to dua, when you lift your hands and call upon Him, you are reminding yourself that you are never truly powerless. The Prophet would constantly be in dhikr after Fajr, after Asr, before sleeping, upon waking up. Every moment of his life was filled with the remembrance of Allah. Because dhikr is not just something you do, it is something that strengthens you, something that fortifies your heart against fear. And this is why the Prophet told us that the one who remembers Allah and the one who does not is like the living and the dead. Because a heart without dhikr is a heart exposed to every whisper of Shaytan, every doubt, every fear. But a heart that is constantly engaged in the remembrance of Allah is a heart that is unshaken by the trials of this world. So when fear tries to creep in, when anxiety whispers that you are not strong enough, remember that your strength was never meant to come from you. It was always meant to come from Allah. And the way to access that strength is through dhikr and du'atal. All will do the rest. My dear brothers and sisters, fear often stops us at the edge of action. We stand before a decision, before an opportunity, before a challenge, and we hesitate. We tell ourselves, I'm not ready. What if I fail? What if I make a mistake? What if it doesn't work out? But the reality is, Allah never asks you to see the entire path. He only asks you to take the first step. Look at Maryam when she was alone, exhausted, in pain, and in the midst of a trial she never expected. She was giving birth with no support, no resources, and no way to help herself. And in that moment, what did Allah command her to do? Shake the trunk of the palm tree towards you, it will drop fresh dates upon you. Qur'an 19:25. Now think about this. A weak, fatigued woman in labor. What strength does she have to shake a palm tree? Allah could have provided the dates without asking her to do anything, but He told her to try, to take the first step, and the provision came from Him, because this is how Allah works. He does not expect you to carry the entire burden. He does not expect you to have all the answers. He only asks you to take a small step forward in faith, and He will take care of the rest. Look at Musa when he stood before the Red Sea. The army of Pharaoh was closing in, his people were panicking, and there was nowhere to go, and yet Allah commanded him, strike the sea with your staff. Qur'an 26:63. A piece of wood against a massive body of water. How could that possibly be enough? But the moment Musa obeyed, the sea split. The way was opened, not because of the staff, not because of his strength, but because he took the step Allah asked of him. How many of us stand before our own Red Sea moments? We hesitate because we don't see a clear path. We think, I need to have it all figured out before I begin. But what we fail to realize is that the path only opens when we take the first step, that first application, that first conversation, that first act of trust in Allah. The Prophet Muhammad also teaches us this lesson in the most beautiful way. In the Hijrah, as he and Abu Bakr hid in the cave, the Quraysh were right outside. If they had looked down, they would have seen them. Imagine the tension in that moment. Imagine the fear. And yet, when Abu Bakr expressed his worry, what did the Prophet say? Do not be afraid. Indeed, Allah is with us. Quran 9:40. He did not say, we have a plan. He did not say, they won't find us. He simply reminded Abu Bakr of the one who was always in control. And what happened? The Quraysh never saw them. A spider spun its web over the cave. Birds nested at the entrance, and the impossible became possible, because when you take one step for the sake of Allah, He will take care of the rest. When you make that dua and take action, He will send help from where you least expect. When you trust Him, He will open doors you never imagined. And this is what keeps so many of us stuck. We keep waiting for certainty before we act, but certainty doesn't come before the step, it comes after it. When Ibrahim was thrown into the fire was real. But the moment he took that step of tawakkul, Allah made it cool and safe. When the mother of Musa placed her baby in the river, she had no idea what would happen. But Allah took that small act of trust and turned it into the means by which Musa was raised in the palace of Pharaoh himself. And this is the lesson. Allah is not asking you to split the sea. He is not asking you to control the outcome. He is only asking you to trust Him enough to take the first step.